Decades ago, the people of this isolated Japanese island suddenly vanished, leaving behind an entire city now frozen in time. And so I've come here to answer the question that now hides within its ruins, the same one at the heart of NieR Automata.
すべての存在は滅びるようにデザインされている。これは呪いか、それとも罰か。
NieR Automata is one of the most complex and philosophical works of modern Japanese media. A game that confronts us with questions about war, abandonment, and the search for meaning in a world that may not have one. For nearly a decade, players have argued over what this game is really trying to say.
You just die already!
And so, by coming to this abandoned city, and by uncovering the strange history of what brought it to ruin, I hoped to understand what truly lies at the heart of this game.
Why? Why did you betray us?
For what began on the quiet shores of this island led me far deeper than I expected. From forgotten sites across Japan to places on the other side of the world, slowly bringing me closer to understanding not just this game, but the real stories, places, and ideas that inspired this elusive Japanese masterpiece. Heading to this island, we had very little idea what to expect. Known as Ikeshima, it's located about 7 kilometers off the western coast of Japan, in Nagasaki, and with a population of less than 100 people, it's now almost completely abandoned. Should we go in?
Yeah.
It's scary. This is my office, welcome.
Is it comfortable?
You're fine, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'm really scared the floor's just gonna go. Like, look how high up we are. I don't even think it's safe to go in there.
What the?
It's definitely not.
What the? Yeah, we're definitely just gonna get tetanus if we go in there.
Yeah, okay. This was a place unlike anywhere we had ever been, and as we began exploring more of the island, we quickly realised just how much of it there was to uncover. With nature having all but taken over, many of the old roads and pathways were now completely inaccessible, but we still managed to find a lot of what remained. Ruined industrial buildings, massive pieces of machinery, just so many cats.
So it appears I've made a friend.
With each new place we stumbled upon, we had new questions about what happened to the people that lived here, and why it looked the way it did. And I also had a great time flying our drone. But after a quick 5-hour side quest through a forest and 60 feet up the side of a crumbling building, we got the drone back. What struck us most about this island, though, besides the near-death experiences, was just how much it actually felt like stepping into the world of the game, which was not something we were really expecting going into this. Taking place in the ruins of an abandoned city far into humanity's future, the world and atmosphere of NieR Automata is one that's industrial and empty. Just like Ikeshima, all that's left to explore here are the hollow remains of machinery and slowly collapsing infrastructure, the remnants of an ongoing war which we're thrown into from the very start of the game. In this world, we're told that humanity has fled to the moon following an alien invasion that began centuries ago. And after the aliens built machine life forms to fight for them, humanity then developed androids in response. And so it's this proxy war of machines that we find ourselves in, following 2B and 9S, two androids from a robotic military unit built to defend mankind.
Contact command. Request assistance.
As the game progresses, you travel across the ruins of this world as these two characters, carrying out missions for humanity, discovering new areas, and ultimately uncovering a strange process of evolution within the machine lifeforms. But beneath the story that unfolds lies a landscape that remains eerily empty throughout NieR. And rather than being filled with moments of interaction or discovery like a typical open world game, instead what we're left with here is a lingering soundtrack and this looming sense of abandonment and isolation. A feeling that becomes deeply important to the story that follows, and to what makes NieR so strangely connected to the history of this island. So one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that it was insanely hot on this island, like 40 degrees Celsius, and by the end of filming I actually got heat stroke, and I didn't eat for like 3 days after, which is apparently something that can happen. But it is winter now, and I can eat again, which is why it's lucky that this video is sponsored by Tokyo Treat. Tokyo Treat are a monthly Japanese snack box service. They send you a box straight from Japan every month that's filled with limited edition snacks that you usually can't get anywhere outside the country. And this one, the box that I get to open, is their February Valentine's Day edition. So let's see what we've got. Oh, I haven't had this for like a year. That is sick. This is genuinely like my favorite chocolate. That's made me so happy, like unreasonably happy. So one thing they also do is give you a culture book, and it basically tells you about everything that's in the box, as well as all the necessary allergen information. Japan always has like insane Kit Kat flavors, and this one is strawberry shortcake, and we're gonna try it. That is actually really good. So, if delicious Japanese snacks like these interest you, or if you're looking for a fun Valentine's Day present for someone, you can check out Tokyo Treat for yourself in the link in our description below. Okay, now back to me pretending like I'm not being cooked alive. Right now, we're walking through the remains of these reinforced concrete buildings on the western side of the island. There's just over 50 of them in total, and they're all quite clearly numbered, forming this strange kind of regimented city. And the reason for this is that they used to be apartment buildings designed specifically to house the island's core population of mine workers. And so this is why Ikeshima's landscape appears so industrial today. This small decaying city, along with almost all of the infrastructure left on the island, including shops, hospitals, and even a school, were constructed with a singular function in mind: to serve a giant coal mine that was set up here in the 1950s, one that can be found at the very heart of Ikeshima. And it's absolutely massive. Construction on it finished in 1959, and it went on for 42 years, making it the last of its kind to essentially operate in Japan. For more than 4 decades, an entire community of almost 10,000 people at its peak was built around it. But one day, just over 23 years ago, that all changed, and almost overnight, the mine and the island it was built on was left behind.
Are they dead?
To be. Look.
Destroyed alien motherships.
Welcome to the graveyard of our creators.
Abandonment in NieR Automata is something that defines not just the game's setting, but the very foundations of its story. And we're shown our first proper glimpse of this in the initial twist of the game, where it's revealed that the aliens our characters are supposedly fighting have long been dead, killed by the very same machines they created.
You destroyed your own creators?
Oh, there's no need to fret about them.
This is a truth that reframes the entire mission 2B and 9S have been on, forcing them to reconsider the nature of this war and the enemies that they've refused to see as conscious until now.
Doesn't matter how much oil you give him, little guy. You can't make a machine your brother.
But it also sets into motion a much deeper idea within the game. Because as the story progresses, and we live the same events again, but now through the eyes of NieR, we start to see that things aren't quite as they seemed, and that something far more unsettling exists beneath this world.
Looks like info about how the Council of Humanity was formed as part of Project Yorha. Wait, isn't that backwards?
As these characters continue on their mission to defend mankind and remain completely loyal to their creators, quietly, almost in the background to the main conflict, a darker truth is revealed to NieR.
So did Yorha actually create the Council of Humanity?
Yes.
But that means...
Mankind no longer exists. In truth, humans were already extinct when the aliens attacked.
But why?
No one fights without a reason. And we need a god worth dying for.
This, then, seems to be the idea at the heart of NieR Automata. That, for these characters, God is dead. Humanity, their creators, no longer exist, and so, left without a reason to go on living, the androids simply carried on pretending like that weren't the case. This is of course a deeply profound and philosophical idea, and one that we're going to try to explore further, which begs the question of how exactly Ikeshima helps us to understand it. In the wake of World War II, Japan needed urgently to rebuild, and without any domestic oil, they turned to coal mining for their energy. This was an industry that skyrocketed through the 1940s and 50s, but it involved a process that was dirty, labour-intensive, and wildly dangerous. And so, by 1959, when Ikeshima was finally made operational, coal had already begun to decline as the nation's main source of energy. Being one of the last mines ever constructed in Japan, it was built as the industry was dying, and in the decades that followed, Japan's mines were shut down one by one, until eventually, in 2001, Ikeshima too was brought to a close, leaving massive amounts of infrastructure, machinery, and people without a purpose. And so, it's here that NieR Automata begins to align closely with Ikeshima's history. Because this story is also one of a gradual and deepening collapse. First, of the war our characters are fighting, in learning that it's fundamentally based on a lie. And then also of Yorha, the entire android command structure which later falls to corruption. For NieR, this collapse then deepens even further with the loss of his only companion. And by the end of the story, he's left without purpose or meaning, abandoned by his institution, his companion, and ultimately, the god he was built to serve.
None of it matters. We aren't required in this world anymore.
In this way, Ikeshima doesn't just seem to reflect the setting and atmosphere of NieR Automata, but its narrative too, as an island of machinery now entirely left behind. We seem to be left with a question then. That if God is dead, if there's no higher purpose for our existence, then what reason is there to go on living? This is ultimately what NieR Automata seems to ask us. But there's actually another important question here that I want to address first. Because as philosophical as this game might seem, if you didn't know, the person responsible for creating it, Yoko Taro, is actually a deranged bull-headed man. And this creates a bit of a problem for us. What fans often argue about this game is that its themes and story aren't just random, but based very specifically on philosophies and ideas from different parts of history. And most of all, on the philosophy of existentialism, a movement that emerged in response to thinkers like Soren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche.
It seems this Nietzsche was quite a profound thinker.
But while it's easy to find direct parallels like this throughout NieR, Yoko Taro makes it hard to know how intentional they really are, and how seriously we can actually take this game. When asked about 2B's design, for example, and why she wears heels instead of something more practical, his response was basically just that he really likes girls. I mean, something I knew nothing about is that there's also a secret boss battle where the CEO of Square Enix literally descends from the sky himself to fight you. I mean, like, literally, why did they do this? They fire their heads at you. That's what they shoot at you, their heads. There's another guy as well. It seems then we're left with the question of whether this game is a philosophical masterpiece or nothing more than the mindless decisions of a crazy man. But luckily, there is a way for us to find out which. We just have to travel somewhere very, very far away. Please support us on Patreon. This was a stupid decision. Paris, the London of France. A city where rats can cook, the architecture is immaculate, and nobody explains anything because you're already supposed to know. And so I've come here not just to figure out why 2B wears a French-made outfit, but to uncover a far more direct influence on this game, one that helps us answer the existential question at its core.
And specifically, I've come to an area known as Saint-Germain-des-Prés, a neighbourhood at the very heart of Paris, where for decades famous artists, musicians and writers have gathered.
And there's a very specific reason why. As we've seen from Yoko Taro's layered and often cryptic game design, NieR Automata is filled with specific philosophical references. In addition to Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, throughout the world you can also find machine life forms that seem to be named after other European philosophers, like Blaise Pascal, Friedrich Engels, and Karl Marx. And while they're no doubt meant to reflect a deeper engagement with questions about belief, identity, and meaning, there are two philosophers we see referenced here that I think hold a deeper significance than it would seem, those being Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre.
And it was at these two cafes behind me, Les Deux Magots and Café des Fleurs, where these philosophers first formulated their ideas. So we're currently sat in Café des Fleurs. This is a spot in France that's been frequented by artists and intellectuals for decades, like Ernest Hemingway, Miles Davis, and Albert Camus. But this exact spot where I'm sitting right now is actually where Jean-Paul Sartre used to sit, and where he wrote his magnum opus on being and nothingness, the 700-page absolute unit of a book that essentially gave birth to the existentialist movement.
Sartre was a very smart man who, as far as I can tell, wasn't particularly associated with top hats, but in the game he's referenced with this distinguished machine, Jean-Paul, who spouts random Sartrean phrases at you and makes you deliver mail to his adoring fans, without ever moving from his comfy spot in Pascal's village. And this is actually very similar to Sartre himself. It's said that he practically lived at this cafe.
But the other notable writer who often joined him here was Simone de Beauvoir, an icon of existentialist and feminist thought.
And she takes a larger role in the game, being referenced with one of the first major bosses, Simone, a machine that's become obsessed with beauty and self-image, a clear homage to Beauvoir's writing on identity and gender. These two were essentially the mother and father of the modern existentialist movement, and holding a lifelong partnership, one that the game also alludes to, you can now find them buried in Paris together. But this still leaves the question of what exactly their philosophy was, and whether I really needed to come here to just sit around and talk about it. At the core of existentialism is a simple idea, and is the very first thing that Jean-Paul says to us in the game, that existence precedes essence, meaning that first we simply just exist, and only then do we find meaning. This is essentially what our characters are faced with in the game. In learning that humanity has been dead for thousands of years, they're faced with the truth that their existence had no inherent meaning or purpose to begin with, and as a result, they're now left with the task of finding their own reasons for existing, to give meaning to their lives themselves. But there's also a deeper context to this philosophy, one that seems relevant both to our understanding of NieR and to why I came to Paris in the first place.
Because Existentialism wasn't born in a vacuum as the purely abstract ponderings of a man in a cafe. Instead, it emerged under the weight of violence, oppression, and occupation.
Between 1940 and 1944, France was under occupation following their defeat in World War II. For these 4 years, the city was governed under direct German military authority, and while Paris remained physically intact, daily life was heavily restricted. Newspapers and radio were censored, Jewish citizens were systematically arrested, and acts of resistance were met with imprisonment or execution. For many living in the city, the occupation created a sense of existential despair. People had to wrestle with the fact that old systems of meaning, politics, religion, even nationalism had collapsed. And so it was within this context that both Sartre and Beauvoir formed their ideas on existentialism, a context that Yoko Taro seems clearly aware of in NieR Automata.
Remember your pain, the pain of having your homeland stolen.
Not only is this game set against the backdrop of an endless war, but one that's said to take place in the year 19,945, echoing directly the concluding year of World War II. And as 2B, 9S and A2 struggle through this conflict, we see them face similar conditions. The total collapse of authority, the loss of those they love, circumstances that seem to grow more and more dire. Within this desperation, they're ultimately forced to act alone, with no higher command to turn to and no moral certainty to fall back on. And it's here that the deeper significance of existentialism becomes clearer. Because what this philosophy ultimately states is that it's our actions and our choices that over time form the meaning of our lives. After Sartre's release as a prisoner of war, himself and Beauvoir continued developing ideas that were starkly defiant. Sartre's play The Flies, for example, directly explored themes of freedom and responsibility under oppression. And this defiance was taken even further by other existentialists like Albert Camus, who risked his own life working as editor of the underground resistance newspaper, Combat. Together, these responses echo the idea at the core of this philosophy, that meaning isn't something you discover in the world. Instead, it's something that emerges gradually from what you repeatedly choose to care about. It's in who we protect, what we sacrifice, and ultimately in how we choose to live that we shape the meaning of our lives.
A future is not given to you. It is something you must take for yourself.
But as NieR Automata goes on to show us, often in times of war and hopelessness, this responsibility can be too heavy to bear. Sitting quietly on the edge of Nagasaki Prefecture, these forgotten ruins mark the final location on our journey through NieR Automata. And while they look like something straight out of the game, they actually bring us deeper into the war that seemed to influence it. Because this overgrown building and the concrete structures that extend into the sea are what now remain of the Ikeshima torpedo test site, a World War II era facility that was designed for the construction and testing of underwater weaponry. But in its final years of operation, this site took on a far darker purpose. It was here that Japan tested Kaiten, manned torpedoes designed specifically for suicide missions. Kaiten itself meaning the turning of heaven's will. With these weapons, pilots were permanently sealed inside, where they would guide the torpedoes directly into enemy ships, with no possibility of escape. By the time the Kaiten program was introduced in 1944, Japan's naval situation had become desperate, and as a result, the Kaiten pilots, alongside other suicide forces like the Kamikaze, came to represent one of the most extreme expressions of devotion in this war. And it's not hard to see how they're reflected in NieR. In the first half of the game, we see 2B and 9S function quite literally as kamikaze fighters, repeatedly sacrificing themselves and their memories for the cause they've been assigned. It's only when things start to fall apart that they recognize the endless cycle of violence they're a part of, a cycle that 2B later dies within, while 9S, having learned the truth, faces an even more tragic end. Overcome with rage and nihilism, he ultimately fails to find meaning for himself, instead pursuing a blind path of revenge, where his actions are blamed solely on his enemies.
Don't you dare talk to me about Goofy!
A path that eventually ends in his destruction. It's through the tragedy of these characters, then, that NieR Automata quietly builds an existentialist warning about violence. That when we fail to take responsibility for our own meaning, and when we let it be determined by systems, causes, or emotions, violence becomes easier. Because when no one feels personally responsible, no one stops. Today, the ruins of this test site have been left to quietly fade away, and perhaps intentionally. In the years since the war, many of the suicide pilots who survived recounted the immense pressure and obligation they felt in choosing to enlist, essentially having to convince themselves of their need to die. And for many, what remained after was not honour, but guilt, disillusionment, and meaninglessness. When we first encounter A2 in the game, she exists outside the conflict entirely. Being the sole survivor of a failed suicide mission, she now remains disillusioned and hostile to both sides, no longer believing in the war or that her actions can affect any change. But it's through her story that the question at the heart of NieR Automata, of how to move forward in the face of meaninglessness, finally seems to be given an answer. As A2's journey progresses, slowly we see her anger and emptiness begin to shift. Rather than pursuing revenge, A2 starts to act in ways that reduce the suffering around her.
God, take care of Nines.
And what this path ultimately amounts to is her choice to bring the entire conflict to an end, even at the cost of her own life, and with no certainty that the world after will be any better.
I never quite realized how beautiful this world is.
This then leads to the final hidden ending of the game, a bullet hell taking place through the credits that poses an escalating and impossible challenge. Here, the difficulty continues to increase, and you die over and over again until eventually help begins to arrive, offered anonymously by other players who made the same journey before you. With their help, you finally succeed, and at the end, you're given a choice. To delete your own save file, something that takes multiple playthroughs to complete, so that someone else can receive this same help. And it's here that the true message of NieR Automata emerges. If you were to walk through an abandoned island of your own life, looking back on everything it held, it might be easy to fall into despair, to get the sense that without a higher purpose, in the end, none of it really mattered. But what NieR Automata shows us is that this same absence of meaning is exactly what gives our lives weight. We have only the choices that we make to find meaning for our lives, and while that is a terrifying freedom to accept, this game shows us one possible way of using it. By choosing compassion and shaping a life through how we care for others.